This is a lecture from OpenTuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
Hello. In this short lecture, we're going to look at provisions and contingencies, IAS 37. IAS 37 was introduced because companies were using provisions to manipulate profits. So if they had too many profits in one year, they would set up a provision that they didn't really need, and then they would release it the next year. It's a great way to plan out profits if you want to. So, as a result of IAS 37, provisions must now be set up only in certain circumstances. Remember that the word is only associated with liabilities. So, there is no such thing as a provision for bad debts. That's called an allowance for bad debts. So this is only liability accounting. Here we've got the criteria for setting up the provision in the first place. You would have seen these before when you were actually looking at your financial reporting. The key issue is that there must be an obligation in the same way as if I, as a result of a past event, had to pay money to someone. So perhaps if I was to baff them on the nose, then I would have to repair their nose. So the past event would me be baffing them on the nose. I don't do that, by the way. It's just an example. And then the obligation is to pay money. The payment of money must be probable. And effectively, again, we talk about the obligation either arising by law, that's a legal obligation, or from past practice, that's a constructive obligation. So if I've got a policy of cleaning up environmental damage, and I always do, that's a constructive obligation. On the assumption that the payment is probable and that I'm able to measure what's happening reliably, so the amount I'm paying reliably, I should then set up a provision. In most cases, the double entry for setting up the provision would be to debit P&L, credit provision, reducing profit, and increasing liabilities. When I measure the provision, it needs to be my best estimate. In some circumstances, you can use expected values. That's quite rare. But in fact, this would be something like a warranty claim. So if I'm selling batteries and then I have to estimate how many of the batteries might go wrong in the first month or whatever, I might use then expected values. But I wouldn't be using that for something like a legal claim. I would probably just ask the lawyer for their best estimate. Sometimes provisions can not only be a bit uncertain in amount, but also in timing. So if the amount of money is not payable within, say, the next year, we would then need to discount. That won't be a problem in the exam because you'll be given a discount rate. There is a criteria, so whenever you see a provision, I would expect you to be writing all of those words. Let's have a look at this example 1. If you want, pause the recording while you read the example. We understand that York, the company, has a publicised environmental policy. So they do say that they will clean up environmental damage. Whatever the law says, they will clean it up. That is an example of a constructive obligation. Some shops say that they will give you your money back, whatever the reason. Not many shops, but some shops do. That's not the law, is it? But it's a constructive obligation. It is the practice of that shop. When you read through this, you saw that there were three amounts of damage that they've done, one costing 4, one costing 5, and one costing 6. It makes no difference what the law says, because I would say we always clean up damage. Therefore, I would recognise a provision for the total of 4, 5, and 6. So I would recognise a provision for the full amount, which is 4 plus 5 plus 6. That would be $15 million. And remember, they don't want you to write journals in the exam, but sometimes, unless they ask for them, sometimes it helps just to write it down for our own purposes, doesn't it? They're reducing profit by 15 and increasing a liability by 15. IAS 37 sets out certain specific examples of provisions, and these are quite useful. So, can you provide just because you expect to make a loss next year? And the answer is categorically, of course not. So, no provision. Can you provide for an onerous contract? An onerous contract, onerous means with a burden, like carrying a big sack of bricks on your back. So if you have a contract that's going to make a loss and you've signed it and you're stuck with it, you do recognise a provision for that loss. Hopefully that's quite rare, because normally you would think up front, wouldn't you, about whether it'll make a profit or a loss. But maybe you've locked in, like a pharmacy chain, perhaps they've locked into buying the drugs from the government at one figure, and in fact now, costs have changed dramatically again, and actually they find that in a loss-making contract. So it's, as it says here, an onerous contract is where the cost is greater than the benefits. You do recognise a provision. Probably the most common sort of provision that we see is restructuring. So another word again here would be things like redundancies, because they've decided to close a particular factory. So redundancy costs. And historically, companies would set up a provision for redundancy and then cancel it. They would never tell the workers that they were at risk of redundancy. They'd got no intention of sacking them. It was just a way to manipulate profits. It's not allowed now. So restructuring costs, as it says here, again, can only be set out if two criteria are met. Number one, there must be a detailed plan. And number two, it must have been announced. Now clearly, if your manager says to you, you're fired, you don't expect to be kept on. So you would go and find another job. So this, again, makes sure that these provisions are only set up, again, when you really intend to go ahead with the restructure. As it says here, again, you cannot recognise provisions for continuing activities, and sometimes it may be that you are retraining the remaining staff to do 2 jobs or 3 jobs or whatever. Retraining costs, in theory, are avoidable. So essentially, you can't recognise a provision for that. So an example of this would be retraining, again, the staff that remain. That's continuing. You only recognise it for the cost of the staff that unfortunately you're having to let go. Another very common provision is environmental provisions. Again, in particular, where you're concerned with the damage that's caused by an asset. So at the moment, of course, environmentally, people will do things like construct wind farms or fields full of solar panels, and at some stage those things will break or wear out and have to be removed. So in my example here, the cost of construction is 40. I am required by law, that's a legal obligation, to demolish it at the end of its life, and I think the cost of that is going to be 8. So in present value terms, the cost of this project is 48. Notice what we do. We capitalise the 48. 40 is what I spend today. The other 8 is a liability, and that's a discounted amount. Then over the next N years, that provision will grow at whatever the discount rate was. The PPE will be depreciated. So if the PPE has got a life of 10 years, there'll be an expense in the P&L of 4.8 million. What we're doing, isn't it, is making sure that the cost not only of construction, but also of destruction or demolition again, are all expensed in the P&L over the life of the asset. Finally, there is sometimes confusion between provisions and contingencies. So if I start with a contingent liability, in almost all cases it's here, it is a possible obligation. So I am being sued. If I will probably lose, I will recognise a provision. If I will possibly lose, then I will need to disclose a contingent liability in the notes to the financial statements. It's also possible, isn't it, that we could be suing someone else, in which case, in theory, you can have contingent assets, which once again are sometimes disclosed. That would be if something was probable. Do you see the difference between the two numbers in the circles? Liabilities are disclosed only if they're possible. Possible is 50-50, 50% or less. Assets, though, would be disclosed if they're probable. So essentially, you're more likely to recognise a liability, aren't you, than an asset. I might just do a little table. I wonder if we could summarise that. I'll just open up another slide. Just a little table about those degrees of certainty. You see, there are 4 degrees of certainty. Something could be virtually certain, or probable, or possible, or remote. It's not going to happen. If you're thinking about a liability, including a provision, then I would recognise the liability if it was probable or virtually certain. That's again when you've got a provision coming in. If it's not round sum, then it would just be a liability. If it's a possible liability, I would disclose, and of course it's called a contingent liability. If it's remote, it doesn't matter. I would ignore it. On the asset side, it's slightly asymmetric, it's slightly different. On the asset side, I would only recognise the asset if it was virtually certain. If it's probable, I'd disclose a contingent asset. Anything below, I'd ignore. Don't forget you can pause the recording at any stage if you're making the odd extra note. Think about the situation of the chicken shop. So the chicken shop, again, sells Mrs. Perkins a poisoned chicken, and she's very upset, so she sues them, so they will probably have to recognise a provision. They then sue the farmer that sold them the poisoned chicken. Presumably, that's again a probable liable asset, so that would just be disclosed. So sometimes you recognise the liability, but you only disclose the related asset. I know you'll have seen all of that in financial reporting, but hopefully it's been a useful reminder. And there we are with provisions and lovely contingencies.